Hey everyone. How are you doing tonight? Let's talk about something a little fragrant. We often romanticize the past, don't we? The grand castles, the elegant gowns, the candlelight balls. But have you ever stopped to wonder, amidst all that perceived glamour, just how bad did people smell in the 1600s? It's a question that sort of grounds everything in a very human reality. If you were living back then, navigating your day-to-day social life, it might have been a sensory challenge far more complex than anything we face today. Thinking about it almost makes you grateful for modern plumbing, doesn't it? If you enjoy these little dives into the details of the past, maybe consider giving a like or subscribing to the channel. I always love to see in the comments where and when you're listening from. It feels like we're all in this quiet, little historical bubble together. Alright, find a comfortable spot. You can dim the lights a little more. Let's take a deep breath of our clean, 21st century air, and slowly, gently, begin tonight's journey into a very different world. To understand the personal scent of the 17th century, we must first understand the world in which it existed. It was a world that was, by its very nature, profoundly and pervasively smelly. The baseline, the ever-present olfactory backdrop of daily life, was not neutral. It was a complex, thick, and often overwhelming symphony of odors, especially in a growing metropolis like London or Paris. There was no escaping it. The very air was heavy with the evidence of life, death, industry, and a near-total lack of what we would consider basic sanitation. The streets themselves were the primary offenders. Most were unpaved, turning into a treacherous, glutinous mud with the slightest rain. But this was no ordinary mud. It was a dense mixture of dirt, animal dung, discarded food, and human waste. The concept of a municipal sewer system was centuries away. The most common method of waste disposal was simply to toss it out of a window. In cities like Edinburgh, a cry of "Garde-la!", a corruption of the French "Gardes l'eau!", or "Watch out for the water!", would, if you were lucky, precede a cascade of household refuse and the contents of a chamber pot hurtling towards the street below. This mixture would fester in the open gutters that ran down the center or sides of the streets, creating a stagnant, putrid sludge. This urban environment was also teeming with animals, living cheek by jowl with the human population. Horses were the primary mode of transportation, and their droppings were a constant feature of the thoroughfares. But it didn't stop there. Many city dwellers kept pigs, chickens, and even cows in their yards or, sometimes, inside their own homes on the ground floor. These animals added their own unique contributions to the aromatic tapestry of the city. Stray dogs were everywhere, and the Thames, the lifeblood of London, was treated as a colossal, moving garbage dump. Everything ended up in the river, waste from houses, offal and blood from the numerous slaughterhouses that lined its banks, chemical byproducts from workshops, and the occasional corpse, both animal and human. The famous Fleet River, a tributary of the Thames, was by this point less a river and more an infamous open sewer, so clogged with filth that it was said to flow with a sable torrent of effluent. Then came the smells of commerce and industry. Specific trades were notorious for their potent emissions, and zoning laws were non-existent. A perfumer's shop could easily be situated next to a tannery, creating a truly bizarre olfactory juxtaposition. Tanneries were perhaps the most dreaded neighbors. The process of turning animal hides into leather involved soaking them in vats of urine, slathering them with dog or pigeon dung to soften them, and using vats of lime. The resulting stench of ammonia and decaying organic matter was breathtakingly foul and could be detected from a great distance. Close by, you might find a dyer's workshop, with its sharp, acrid smells of chemical mordants and boiling vats of pigment. Blacksmiths and forges filled the air with the sulphurous scent of burning coal, a thick, sooty smoke that coated every surface and irritated the lungs. The air was so thick with this coal smoke, particularly in winter, that London became known for its pea soup fogs, a dense, choking smog that could reduce visibility to a few feet. Even the production of food added to the cacophony. Butchers slaughtered animals in their shops or in the open street, the smell of fresh blood mingling with the buzzing of flies around discarded entrails. Fishmongers displayed their wares on open slabs, the scent of fresh and not-so-fresh fish adding a salty, pungent note to the air. It was in this environment that people lived, worked, and socialized. The smell of an unwashed human body, redolent with sweat and natural oils, was just one more layer, one more instrument in this vast, urban orchestra of odor. It was a constant, but against the backdrop of such powerful environmental smells, it may not have always been the most prominent. Now let's try to place you there, right in the middle of it all. Gently close your eyes. Imagine you are stepping out of a small, timber-framed house onto a bustling London street, sometime around the year 1650. It's a cool morning, but the air is already thick, not with mist, but with the day's accumulated scents. The first thing you notice is that you don't just smell one thing, you smell everything, all at once. It's a dense wall of aroma that you have to push through. You pull your cloak a little tighter, more out of instinct than cold. Your shoes, hopefully sturdy leather with thick soles, press into the ground, which is not solid but yields slightly. It's a damp, uneven surface of compacted earth, cobblestones slick with a sheen of indeterminate grime, and softer, more odorous patches you try to avoid. You begin to walk, your senses on high alert. You keep your head up, not just to see where you're going, but to watch the windows above. The memory of a near miss with a tossed-out bucket of slop is still fresh. As you move, the general, omnipresent smell of damp earth, refuse, and coal smoke begins to differentiate itself. You pass a cookshop, and for a moment, the savory smell of roasting meat and baking bread cuts through the mire. It's a welcome, though fleeting, relief. But just a few doors down, that pleasant scent is brutally extinguished by the sharp, chemical tang wafting from a dyer's workshop. The air here stings your nostrils and makes your eyes water slightly. You quicken your pace. A cart rattles past, pulled by a large horse. The animal's scent, a mixture of hay, sweat, and leather from its harness, is momentarily strong, followed by the fresh, steamy smell of the dung it leaves in its wake. People jostle past you. A finely dressed gentleman in a velvet doublet and lace collar strides by. As he passes, you catch a powerful wave of his perfume, a heavy, musky scent of civet and ambergris. It's designed to create a bubble of aristocratic fragrance around him, but it doesn't entirely succeed. Underneath the expensive perfume, you can detect the faint, sour notes of stale sweat clinging to his clothes. Then, a group of laborers, their faces smudged with soot, push by on their way to a job. They smell of honest toil, of sweat dirt, maybe the faint metallic scent of their tools. Their smell is raw and unfiltered, a stark contrast to the perfumed gentleman. You turn a corner, and the smell hits you with renewed force. You're near a butcher's row. The air is thick with the coppery smell of blood and the heavier, gamier scent of raw meat. You see slabs of beef and mutton hanging from hooks, and a butcher in a blood-stained apron is expertly carving a carcass. Flies buzz lazily in a thick cloud over a barrel of discarded entrails. You hold your breath for a few steps, a natural reaction, but you can't hold it for long. This is the air you must breathe. This is the scent of your city, the very fabric of your world. It is intense, it is challenging, but it is also, in its own strange way, the smell of life. After navigating that olfactory assault course of the city streets, a modern mind might assume that arriving home would be a chance to wash it all away. One would imagine the supreme relief of a hot bath, scrubbing off the day's accumulated grime and smells. But the relationship between a 17th century European and water was, to put it mildly, complicated and deeply fraught with suspicion. The act of bathing as we know it, a daily, routine, cleansing ritual, was not only uncommon but actively avoided by most people, from the lowest peasant to the highest king. This aversion wasn't born from laziness or a simple lack of plumbing, though that was certainly a factor for the less affluent. It stemmed from deeply ingrained medical beliefs and a pervasive fear that had haunted Europe for centuries. The prevailing medical philosophy of the time, inherited from the ancient Greeks and Romans, was based on the theory of humors and the danger of miasmas. Miasmas were thought to be bad air, foul-smelling vapors rising from swamps, decaying matter, and other unsanitary places that carried disease. It was believed that illness entered the body through its orifices, and one of the most significant ways to become vulnerable was by opening the pores of the skin. And what was the most effective way to open one's pores? A hot bath. This fear was tremendously amplified by the collective trauma of the Black Death. Though the great plague waves of the 14th century were in the past, the memory and the fear of sudden, inexplicable pestilence were woven into the cultural fabric. Public bathhouses, which had been relatively popular in the Middle Ages, were now viewed with extreme suspicion. They were seen as places of moral licentiousness and, more importantly, as hubs of contagion where the plague could spread like wildfire among the exposed, vulnerable bodies of the bathers. Doctors and learned men of the 17th century actively preached against full-body immersion. They argued that the skin was the body's first line of defense, a protective barrier against the hostile, disease-ridden world outside. Submerging it in water, especially hot water, would soften this barrier, rendering it porous and permeable. Like a leaky ship, the body would then be defenseless against the onslaught of deadly miasmas, which could seep in and wreak havoc on the internal balance of the humors. Therefore, a bath was not a casual affair. It was often a serious medical procedure, prescribed by a physician for a specific ailment, and undertaken with great caution. One might be prescribed a bath with certain herbs to treat melancholy, or a cool bath to reduce a fever, but for a healthy person to bathe regularly was seen as tempting fate. King Louis XIII of France was said to have not taken a full bath in his entire adult life. Queen Elizabeth I, considered quite progressive for her time in this regard, was noted for bathing about once a month. Whether she needed it or not. For most, cleanliness was an entirely different concept. It wasn't about being water scrubbed, it was about being dry cleaned. The true marker of hygiene and status was not the skin, but the linen. The primary tool for achieving cleanliness was the undergarment, known as a shirt for men and a chemise or shift for women. Made from linen, or sometimes cotton, this was the layer of clothing that sat directly against the skin. Linen was a remarkable fabric, highly prized for its ability to absorb moisture and dirt. The prevailing theory was that the linen undergarment would wick away the body's impurities, the sweat, the oils, the excess humors that the body exuded. In essence, the dirt was transferred from the skin to the fabric. Therefore, a person was considered clean not if they had just bathed, but if they were wearing a clean linen shirt or chemise. The wealthy elite, who could afford vast wardrobes of these garments, might change their linen multiple times a day. They would put on a fresh shirt in the morning, perhaps another before dinner, and another before bed. The soiled linen was whisked away by servants to be laundered, a laborious process involving harsh fly soap, boiling, and bleaching in the sun. The visible proof of your cleanliness and social standing was the brilliant white linen peeking out at your neck and cuffs. A crisp, snowy white lace collar or cuff against a dark velvet doublet proclaimed to the world that you were not only wealthy enough to afford such finery, but also clean enough to wear it without immediately soiling it. This is why formal portraits from the era placed such a heavy emphasis on these elements. They were the equivalent of a modern-day luxury watch or designer handbag, a potent symbol of status, wealth, and by 17th century standards, impeccable personal hygiene. Some limited washing of the face and hands was common, usually with cold water in a basin, and the mouth might be rinsed with scented water. But the body itself remained largely untouched by water, protected and cleansed by its ever-changing sheath of linen. Now let's step into that quiet, intimate morning ritual. You are a person of some means in the year 1640. You awaken in a large, canopied bed, the heavy velvet curtains drawn back to let in the soft morning light filtering through a leaded glass window. The air in your paneled bedchamber is cool and still. There is no sound of a running shower, no thought of immersing your body in water. Your first movements are slow as you sit up. A servant enters silently, carrying a porcelain ewer and basin, which are placed on a small washstand. The water inside is cool, drawn from the well earlier that morning. You swing your legs out of bed, your feet landing on a woven rug. You approach the washstand. You dip your hands into the basin, the cold water a sharp, pleasant shock. You splash your face, rubbing away the sleep from your eyes. You might take a cup of this water, perhaps infused with a bit of rosewater or orange flower water, and rinse your mouth, spitting the contents into a separate bowl. This is the extent of your washing. There is no soap for the body, no vigorous scrubbing. The goal is not to strip the skin of its natural state, but to gently refresh the parts of you that interact most directly with the world. The real ceremony of becoming clean is about to begin. You shrug off the linen nightshirt you wore to sleep. As it comes off, you can feel that it is no longer fresh. It has done its job, absorbing the warmth and vapors of your body throughout the night. Your servant is waiting with your day shirt, freshly laundered and aired. It has been stored in a wooden chest with sachets of dried lavender and rosemary, and it carries their faint, clean, herbal scent. It feels cool and slightly crisp to the touch. As you pull the voluminous garment over your head and let it settle over your torso, the feeling of the fresh linen against your skin is the very definition of cleanliness for your time. This is your shield. This smooth, absorbent fabric is what separates the true you from the grime of the world. It is a personal, pristine environment you carry with you. Once the shirt is on, the rest of the elaborate process of dressing can commence. Servants will bring your breeches, your doublet, your stockings, your shoes. Each layer is carefully placed, but the most important element, the one that is both functional and symbolic, is already in place. As you are buttoning your heavy woolen or velvet doublet, you take care to ensure that the collar of your new linen shirt is perfectly arranged, its white edge a stark, clean line against your neck. You adjust the cuffs so that a generous border of white, perhaps edged with lace, extends beyond the sleeves of your outer garment. Looking into the small, slightly distorted reflection of a polished steel or glass mirror, you see not a freshly showered person, but something far more important in your world, a person whose visible linen is immaculate. That pristine white fabric is your statement. It declares, without a word, that you are civilized, you are prosperous, and you are clean. While clean linen formed the quiet foundation of 17th century hygiene, it was largely a defensive strategy, a personal and private statement of cleanliness. But in the grand, competitive theater of aristocratic society, particularly at court, a quiet defense was rarely enough. To truly make one's mark, one had to go on the offensive. This was an age not of eliminating odors, but of skillfully overpowering, artfully masking, and intentionally layering them. It was a fragrant war, waged not with soap and water, but with the most exotic, powerful, and costly substances that wealth and global trade could procure. The perfumery of the 1600s was a world away from the light, fresh, synthetic fragrances we know today. 17th century perfumes were dense, potent, and built to last, often relying on powerful base notes derived from animals. These ingredients might seem shocking to the modern nose, but they were the absolute pinnacle of luxury and sensuality at the time. 3 substances reigned supreme in this aromatic arsenal: ambergris, musk, and civet. Ambergris, a waxy, grayish substance, is a product of the sperm whale's digestive system, miraculously found floating on the ocean or washed ashore. Aged by the sun and salt water, its initially foul odor transforms into a complex, sweet, earthy, and marine scent. It was astronomically expensive, worth more than its weight in gold, and was prized not only for its unique aroma but also for its legendary ability as a fixative, holding other, more volatile scents to the skin for hours, even days. Then there was musk, harvested from a gland near the abdomen of the male musk deer native to the Himalayas. This reddish-brown, paste-like substance has an incredibly strong, penetrating, and animalic odor that, when properly diluted and aged, becomes a deeply warm, sweet, and powdery scent that was considered the height of sophistication and allure. Finally, there was civet, a soft, yellowish paste secreted from the glands of the civet cat, an animal found in Africa and Asia. In its raw form, civet has an overwhelmingly fecal odor, a fact that 17th century perfumers were well aware of. Yet, they were masters of alchemy. When diluted to minute concentrations in alcohol or oil, this challenging substance would blossom into a surprisingly floral, honeyed, and intensely sensual fragrance. These animalic notes were not intended to create a sterile, unscented cleanliness. On the contrary, they were valued for their ability to blend with the natural odors of the human body. The prevailing thought was that the warmth and personal scent of an individual would meld with the musk or ambergris, creating a unique, signature aroma that was both powerful and deeply personal. Plant-based essences, of course, played their part as well. Rosewater, orange flower water, and oils of lavender, jasmine, rosemary, clove, and cinnamon were used extensively, but they were often built upon the enduring foundation of these animalic fixatives. The application of these fragrances was as important as their composition. Scent was not something to be dabbed discreetly behind the ears. It was a comprehensive environmental strategy. The pomander was a quintessential accessory for any person of quality. This was a small, often beautifully crafted ball of silver or gold, intricately perforated like a filigree cage. Inside, it held a solid compound of fragrant materials, a hard paste made of ambergris, musk, spices, and wax. When walking through a particularly foul-smelling street or a crowded room, a person could lift their pomander to their nose and inhale its pleasant, protective cloud of scent. Leather gloves, an essential part of any fashionable ensemble, were almost always heavily perfumed. The process of tanning leather left it with a harsh, chemical smell, so perfuming the gloves served a dual purpose. It masked the odor of the leather itself and acted as a personal diffuser of fragrance. Gloves, à la frangipane, scented with a popular almond, musk, and civet formula, were highly sought after. Fragrance was also dusted into the elaborate wigs that were becoming increasingly fashionable. Fine starch powder would be scented with violet, rose, or orris root and then puffed liberally into the curls of a wig, creating a fragrant halo around the wearer's head. But it didn't stop at personal application. The truly wealthy scented everything. Their handkerchiefs, their fans, their clothes stored in chests with perfumed sachets, the very upholstery on their chairs, and the wax used to seal their letters were all imbued with their signature scent. To enter the rooms of a great lord or lady was to be enveloped in their personal olfactory world, a clear and unambiguous statement of their presence and power. It was a world saturated in aroma, and nowhere was this olfactory competition more intense, more dazzling, or more overwhelming than at a royal court. Now let us place you there. You are a member of the nobility, preparing for a grand ball at a palace, perhaps Whitehall in London or the glittering New Versailles outside Paris. The year is 1680. Night has fallen. You have spent the last 2 hours being dressed. Your linen is the finest available, a stark white against your skin. Over it are layers of silk, brocade, and velvet. Your wig is freshly powdered with the scent of jasmine and iris. A single drop of a potent rose and musk oil has been applied to your handkerchief. You are ready. You step from your carriage into the palace courtyard and ascend the grand staircase. As you approach the ballroom, you can already feel the heat and hear the hum of hundreds of voices and the distant strains of a string ensemble. You step through the vast double doors, and the sensory wave hits you. It is staggering. 1,000 beeswax candles burn in immense crystal chandeliers hanging from the frescoed ceiling. Their collective light is dazzling, and their warm, sweet, honeyed scent is the first layer of fragrance that greets you, mingling with the palpable heat generated by so many people crowded into one space. You begin to move through the throng of courtiers, and it is like wading through a thick, invisible, and ever-shifting sea of perfume. It is not one scent, but a chaotic, swirling, and competitive cloud of hundreds. Each person, each small group you pass, is an island of its own distinct aromatic statement. The formidable Duchess of X sweeps by, a galleon in a sea of silk, and in her wake, she leaves a powerful trail of ambergris and heavy damask rose. It's opulent, commanding, almost thick enough to taste. You pause to greet a young marquis, whose conversation is punctuated by the sharp, spicy scent of cloves and cinnamon emanating from his waistcoat, and the rich, animalic perfume of the Spanish leather of his gloves. You engage in a whispered piece of court gossip with a countess. With every delicate flutter of her painted fan, she releases a soft puff of violet-scented powder that makes you want to sneeze. The air is so dense with these competing fragrances that it's sometimes difficult to draw a full breath. The warmth of the room intensifies everything, causing the perfumes to bloom and expand, detaching from their wearers to join the general fragrant melee. Then, a shift in the crowd. A hush falls. The king is entering. Before you can even get a clear view, his scent announces his arrival. It is a custom-blended fragrance, unique to him, a powerful and unmistakable composition of orange blossom and musk that cuts through the lesser perfumes of the room. It is the scent of absolute power. As you stand there, amidst the glitter of jewels, the rustle of silk, the heat, and this dizzying olfactory storm, you realize this is more than just a party. It is a battlefield of the senses, where status and favor are communicated not just by a well-turned phrase or a fashionable garment, but by the sheer force and quality of one's chosen fragrance. To be noticed here, you must not only be seen and heard, you must, quite literally, be smelled. The fragrant battles of the royal court were the most extreme expression of a fundamental truth that permeated every level of 17th century society. Smell was identity. Long before a word was spoken, a social rank was announced, or a hand was offered, a person's scent told a rich and complex story about them. It was an invisible, unspoken language that communicated their place in the world, their profession, their health, and even their perceived moral character. In a world with rigid social hierarchies, odor was one of the most immediate and visceral class signifiers. The chasm between the rich and the poor was an olfactory one. The wealthy, as we've explored, smelled of the crisp, sun-bleached scent of frequently changed linen and the heavy, exotic perfumes of musk, civet, and ambergris. Theirs was a curated scent, a costly projection of power and refinement. The vast majority of the population, however, smelled of their labor and their living conditions. A baker carried with them the warm, yeasty smell of bread. A fishmonger was permanently imbued with the salty, briny scent of their trade. A farmer smelled of the earth, of manure, of the sweat of honest, physical toil. A blacksmith smelled of coal smoke and hot metal. This wasn't necessarily judged with the same level of revulsion we might feel today. It was simply a fact, an accepted marker of who you were and what you did. The odor of poverty was a recognized concept, a blend of stale sweat, unwashed bodies, damp living quarters, and the lingering smell of cheap, smoky fuel. This link between smell and identity extended deep into the realms of health and medicine. In a world terrified of miasmas, bad smells weren't just unpleasant. They were quite literally the smell of disease and death. A foul-smelling slum was considered a hotbed of pestilence. A person with a fetid odor was thought to be unwell, their internal humors dangerously out of balance. Doctors of the period were trained as diagnosticians of scent. They would carefully sniff a patient's breath, their sweat, even their urine and feces, believing that the specific odors produced were direct clues to the nature of the illness within. A sour smell might indicate one imbalance, while a putrid one suggested another. Conversely, pleasant fragrances were seen as healthful and protective. This is why a gentleman held a pomander to his nose in a crowd. It wasn't just to avoid an unpleasant smell, but a genuine belief that the good scent could ward off the bad, disease-carrying air. The very idea of the odor of sanctity, a long-held belief that the bodies of saints would exude a miraculously sweet, floral fragrance upon death, shows just how deeply the connection between scent and spiritual or physical purity was ingrained. This bled into perceptions of morality as well. Bad smells were often associated with sin, laziness, and moral decay. A good, sweet-smelling person was often subconsciously perceived as being more virtuous and upstanding. It's a fascinating footnote that while the aristocracy was dousing itself in these heavy animalic perfumes, a few dissenting voices, often writers and philosophers, began to champion a more natural state. They argued that the true scent of a healthy, clean body, a body kept clean by linen and a simple diet, was the most desirable scent of all. This, of course, was a radical and minority viewpoint, a luxury of thought that only the truly healthy and meticulously cared for could even begin to contemplate. These were the invisible rules written in the air itself, the olfactory map by which society navigated. Now, to truly feel the texture of this world, let's leave the palaces and the medical theories behind. Let's spend one full day, from dawn until deep into the night, inside this scented past. You are not a noble this time, nor a courtier at a glittering ball. You are simply an ordinary person, living an ordinary life in a small town or a city neighborhood, sometime in the 1670s. Let the world and its smells wake up around you, slowly and gently. The first thing you become aware of is the quiet. Then the light, a faint gray filtering through a single, small window. The air in your small room is cool and thick. It smells of sleep, of the woolen blanket you're huddled under, and of old wood smoke that seems to have permanently settled into the walls. You sit up, and the straw-filled mattress rustles beneath you. There is a basin with a little water left from yesterday. You dip your fingers in and wipe your face. The water is cold. You rinse your mouth. That's it. You pull on your single linen shift or shirt. It was washed last week, and it has lost its crispness, but it is the cleanest thing you own. Over it, you pull your woolen breeches and tunic, or your heavy kirtle and bodice. These outer clothes are rarely washed. They carry the permanent, signature scent of your life, a base note of wood smoke, overlaid with the faint, lingering smell of your own sweat and the dust of the street. You head to the main room, where a small fire is being coaxed to life. The sharp, acrid smell of the initial smoky flames fills the space before it finds its way up the chimney. Breakfast is simple, a piece of dark, heavy bread and some weak ale. The smell is plain, earthy, and filling. You step outside. The morning air is cool but already layered with smells. The ever-present scent of coal or wood smoke from your neighbor's chimneys, the damp earth of the street, the sharp tang from a nearby stable. You walk to your work. Perhaps you are an apprentice to a candlemaker. As you enter the workshop, the smell of hot, rendering tallow, a greasy, heavy animal scent, envelopes you. For the rest of the day, this smell will be your smell. It will cling to your hair, your clothes, your skin. You work for hours, the motions repetitive. The sun climbs higher, and the day warms up. The workshop becomes stuffy. You can smell the sweat of your own body, and the bodies of the master and other apprentices working alongside you. It is not a smell of shame or embarrassment. It is the smell of labor, as natural and expected as the ache in your back. At midday, you stop for a quick meal, more bread, perhaps a piece of cheese. Its simple scent is a brief interlude before you are once again submerged in the smell of the workshop. The afternoon wears on, the air growing thicker, warmer. When the day's work is finally done, you step back out into the late afternoon light. You are tired. You walk home, a moving cloud of tallow and toil. The city's evening scents are now beginning to rise. The smell of countless cooking fires, the aroma of roasting meats from a wealthy merchant's house, the scent of boiled vegetables and stews from more humble homes like your own. These smells mix with the day's lingering odors of animals and refuse. Back in your small room, you shed your outer garments. The room seems to absorb your day's work, the tallow scent joining the resident wood smoke. You sit in your linen shift, the single barrier between you and the world, which has dutifully absorbed what it can of the day's grime. As darkness falls completely, the sounds of the town begin to quiet down. The olfactory world, too, settles. The sharpest smells dissipate, leaving a thick, complex, and deeply familiar background hum. This is the scent of your reality. It is not clean. It is not simple. But it is your life, written in the air you breathe, day in and day out. You lie down on your straw mattress, pull up the woolen blanket, and let the darkness take you. And now, just let it all begin to drift away. The sense of that long-ago world, the pungent city street, the heavy perfume of the court, the honest smell of the workshop, they are fading now. Like a dream you can't quite hold on to upon waking. The sharp edges are softening. The coppery smell of blood and the acrid smoke from the forge, they recede, becoming distant memories, no longer sharp, no longer present. The overwhelming cloud of ambergris and musk from the grand ballroom thins out, dissolving into the quiet air of your own room. The feeling of the cool, crisp linen, the weight of the woolen clothes, it all becomes lighter, less distinct. Let the memory of the tallow and the wood smoke gently float away. They are just stories now. All that is left is the gentle rhythm of your own breath, here and now. Breathing in the calm, clean air of your own quiet space. And breathing out, letting go of that other world. There is nothing left to smell, nothing left to see from that past. There is only the darkness, the comfort of your bed, and the gentle pull of sleep. Breathing in and out. Let the last echoes of that history fade completely, until there is only stillness. Only peace. Good night.